All right, let's explain to people then how you came to join up with the CIA.
Yeah, so the agency does a lot of different types of hiring. They go to career fairs, they go to job fairs, they go to college fairs, they have an open website. And what people don't realize is like 90% of what the CIA does is not undercover at all. You can go be a logs officer, you can go be a janitor if you want to be, you can be a science and technology like tech officer. And a lot of those are just totally open. Your tax statement says CIA, you drive to the CIA headquarters building, right? You can wear a CIA t-shirt on the weekends. It's only about 10% of us that go undercover. And that was where I was. And that recruiting is a little bit different. So for me, they found me when I was trying to go full-blown hippie, trying to transition from the military into the Peace Corps. All I wanted was like a nice hippie chick with hairy armpits to travel Africa with me saving children. And they intercepted me on that path and brought me into the dark side.
And then you met your wife through this work.
Yeah, and then
so it wasn't all dark side.
It wasn't all dark side, yeah, because she was also on her trajectory to the Peace Corps, and she got intercepted also. So it was perfect. She just had shaved armpits, but that's okay. I can forgive that. Whenever I go anywhere in the world, nobody thinks I look American, and that's the key. The key to disguise is just not looking like what you really are. It's not about looking totally different. It's about breaking the profile so you don't look like what people expect. So in Asia and Latin America, in the Middle East and the Caucasus, I blend in beautifully. Nobody thinks I was a CIA intelligence officer ever. They think I was the help, but they don't ever think I was an intelligence officer.
And something you said that was very fascinating.
Go ahead.
Something you said that was fascinating was you could sit right by friends of yours just a few feet away in one of your disguises. And because people are so focused on what they're doing, just an immediate like around them, that they didn't even know you were there.
Yeah, so there's 3 levels of disguise, and I was specifically talking about level 2 and level 3 disguise in that story. So level 1 disguise is just, I don a pair of glasses, or I wear a ball cap, or I wear a high collar, right? That's all level 1 disguise. Stuff that you can just put on and take off easy enough, right? Break up the profile. Level 2 disguise is when you physically change some part of your body. So I've got this whole giant head of hair back here. So I pull my hair back, that's level 1 disguise. If I cut this hair off and I live a day in your shoes, Shaun, with a bald head, right? Or I grow a long beard, or I put some kind of henna tattoo on my face or something like that, that's level 2 disguise. I could live for an extended period of time, months, with a bald head, a full beard, and henna on my face, and I would not look anything like this right now. So level 2 disguise is still natural, but it's long term. You want to go into 6 months undercover, you want to go 2 years in a different alias, that's how you do it. You don't wear prosthetics for 2 years. You just physically change your look. Level 3 disguise is all the store-bought stuff that you see on TV and in the movies. That's your prosthetic nose and your contact lenses, your fake ears, your black teeth. That's your fat suit, right? Or you're sticking stuff in your shoes to make you 2 inches taller. That's the really advanced stuff that you see in Mission Impossible, but that stuff doesn't survive extreme temperatures. If you're in the Middle East where it's hot, if you're in Siberia where it's cold, if you're someplace really wet, that's the kind of stuff. It's going to fall off your face, and you're going to get caught looking like a fool in front of all the wrong people.
So you said then that it's quite civilized, the world of espionage, versus the danger portrayed by Hollywood. You analogized it to soldiers, want to wipe each other out on the battlefield, but you guys want to catch each other, like find out who's who, and then just follow that person discreetly and gather intelligence. And, it's not in your interest to kill your rivals.
Correct. Yeah. I liken it to a chess game, right? So people think of chess as a game where you're trying to kill the other person's players. And that's true in the military world. And that's true when you look at chess at the surface level. But really, the people who win in the game of chess are not the people who make the most right moves. It's the people who make the least wrong moves. If you make the least mistakes, you're going to win out on the chessboard. That's the world of intelligence. We try to go head to head against the best, most proficient intelligence services in the world and make the least mistakes. If you make the least mistakes, the other person basically falls on their sword, and you're going to have superior information, superior positioning, superior relationships, and you win the day.
So despite you saying that then, what was your hairiest moment?
Oof, man. I would say that there were times when I was traveling abroad and I knew for sure that I had a tail, that I was under surveillance. And that's terrifying, because when you're under surveillance, you know that they know you're something other than who you say you are. And you have to make a decision, right? You have to make a decision. Do you try to lose them? Do you keep them and drag them somewhere other than where your operational meeting is going to happen? Or do you just cancel the whole thing and basically go home empty-handed? And that's all. I mean, all three of those are constantly playing through your head, along with all the other one-offs, like what if I turn the corner and there's a border crossing and they just take me into custody? What if I end up in some empty prison cell, sleeping on a hay mat, and the US has plausible deniability? They're never going to admit I am one of theirs, right? So all of these things are going through your head while you're also trying to execute. So I've had those moments happen abroad. And then you take the best action that you can take. Sometimes that's jumping in behind a corner, changing your profile quick, and trying to duck out the other side before they can see you. And then you're blown, you're burned. So the best you can do is just act on your operational objective and then get the hell out of country. And sometimes you drag them off, and sometimes you take the risk of going to jail. So those are crappy moments, man. Nobody likes asking themselves those questions.
So are you trained then for the eventuality of being captured and tortured?
Yes, you're trained for the eventuality of being captured. Torture is one of those things that everybody turns a blind eye to it. But when you go into certain places, you know that the likelihood is high. So you're taught what's known as resistance techniques. It's not that different from what the military learns in SEER school. You learn how to maintain health and mental health and fitness in small confined spaces. I actually have one of my most popular YouTube videos is me walking people through my own escape workout, what I would do if I was penned into a 5-foot by 3-foot cell. And I can show people exactly how we maintain our health and fitness. But then you have a mental barrage of exercises to keep yourself mentally sharp, and you find a way to increase your pain tolerance. And I talk about pain tolerance on my website to teach people how to increase that pain tolerance through their neural connections and how their cognitive mind processes pain.
Wow, that's absolutely fascinating. Before we continue with your story, then, let's tell the viewers a bit about your YouTube channel. We've got the link in the description box below this video. So what kind of content are you posting over there, and which videos have got the most views?
Yeah, so I've got I've got some videos over there that are super popular that have to do with the technical skills of spying, how to build a cover, how to defend your cover, how to find out when someone's lying to you. I've got information there on basic encryption and encoding, intermediate encryption and encoding. And then I've got a bunch of stuff that's just me in my life. I'm a private intelligence officer still, so I don't work for CIA. I work for private contracts, private clients around the world. So I kind of take folks on that travel with me and walk them through, what am I doing today? What am I doing tomorrow? What's this life look like? And what's the life not look like since COVID, right? But that's the purpose of YouTube. Everything about Everyday Spy is to teach people spy skills that give you an unfair advantage in everyday life, because that's what CIA gave me, an unfair advantage in the field and in everyday life. And nobody ever expects me to be former CIA. If I can give those skills to others, then I've just got that's defining the future leaders of the world, the people who know how to leverage their talents and their abilities in an unfair way to reach their objectives. Everybody else is just going to fail, but those few are going to win.
And how useful is the Myers-Briggs personality test in all this?
I love the Myers-Briggs personality test, man. My premier master course starts by just deep diving into Myers-Briggs and teaching you how to use it operationally. The stuff that you read about in like Cosmopolitan magazine and from, amateur bloggers that are out there, they love talking about knowing yourself. Knowing yourself is less than 10% of the battle. That's some baloney. That's all self-help guru garbage. You don't need to know yourself. You need to know how to use the skills that tell you about yourself to get into the head of other people. Because once you're in someone else's head, you predict their behaviors, you drive their outcomes, you control the day. You want them to hire you, you can get them to hire you. You want them to pay you more, you can get them to pay you more. You want them to charge you less, you can get them to charge you less. But you can't do that by thinking about, my Myers-Briggs personality tells me that I'm sensitive and I'm an introvert. To hell with that, man. I want to know about the person sitting across from you.
Yeah, so unlike the cops, then you profiled targets and then tried to win them over. What does that mean, win them over?
So we talk in the agency about building rapport with scumbags, basically. So all the bad guys out there, whether they're pedophiles, whether they're future traitors, current traitors against their country, right, terrorists, whatever they might be, military dictators, they're all scumbags, but they're also all human beings. And at the core of every human being is a very simple formula that tells you what that person's motivated by. The same person who goes to work every day in a job that's unfulfilling, making $42,000 a year, that person is motivated by the same stuff as a dictator who sits on a throne, executing dozens of people a day. Their motivations are the same, but how they execute on those motivations is different. So what we try to do at the agency, what CIA does in the world of human intelligence, is profile the target you're trying to get secrets from, understand them in a way that only very, very few people understand them, or even better, understand them in a way they don't even understand themselves, because that builds a level of trust. And when you build trust with someone, the next logical emotive step for them is to switch loyalty. And if you can get someone to trust you enough that they become loyal to you, then you have access to everything they have access to. That dictator becomes a dictator that's your puppet. That terrorist becomes a terrorist that's your puppet. And if you're working for CIA, they become a puppet for the CIA.
And you've got a formula called RICE.
Correct. Yeah, RICE is that core motivation formula, right? The RICE is an acronym, RICE. And the R stands for reward, the I stands for ideology, the C stands for coercion, and the E stands for ego. Each of those four areas, RICE, reward, ideology, coercion, or ego, those are the four motivations that drive everybody in all cultures, all languages, all ages, all levels of education. The reason you're talking to me right now boils down to one of those four things. The reason I'm going to go home and take care of my kids this afternoon boils down to one of those four things. And when you understand that and you learn how to master that, pairing that with Myers-Briggs, like just to go back, Shaun, if you understand someone's Myers-Briggs personality and you understand their core motivation, you've got the key to that person's every decision, and you can direct them in whatever way you want them to go.
So you're trying to win a target over then, based on what you just said, but aren't competing countries also trying to win the same target over using the same techniques? How does one stay ahead in that game?
That's the chess game, brother. That's what makes espionage a gentleman's battle. That's what we call it, a gentleman's game, a gentleman's battle. Because I know that you are some nuclear scientist for some hostile country that America wants secrets from. And I know that I'm not the only person you're meeting with. There's at least 4 other intel services all trying to get one-on-one time with you, trying to get the same secrets, doing all the same things. So it's really a race against time and a race against your own skill set. How far are you willing to push that relationship to get to the place where that person trusts you more than anyone else? And I see you froze on me, Shaun. Did you get that audio, or do I need to repeat that?
You can keep going. You're fine. Yeah, just keep going. You're good.
Yeah, man. Perfect.
Yeah.
So that's how that world works. And sometimes we step on each other's toes, right? Even between MI6 and CIA, we step on each other's toes. We find ourselves chasing the same target, and we're like, oh, I figured you would be interested in this person, but I didn't expect you to be meeting at the same restaurant where I'm meeting them. And it's embarrassing and it's not professional, but like that's the nature of the game sometimes.
What about the role of blackmail then? So we saw in the Epstein case many theories of it being a honey trap operation. Do you have any knowledge of anything like that?
Yeah, so when it comes to the Epstein case specifically, I don't have any inside knowledge, but here's the dirty truth that Hollywood doesn't talk about with regards to blackmail. Blackmail falls under that coercion category. Remember in RICE, RICE, the C was coercion. When it comes to why people do things, coercion is the weakest motivator. It's the weakest reason. You can force someone to do pretty much anything, but it's basically a one-time shot. Right? Once they know that you're forcing them, they will never trust you. And if they never trust you, you'll never get their true loyalty. So it's kind of a one and done thing. So the reason that you see professional services avoid coercion is because they know if they employ that, they've lost the day. It's a simple, pragmatic decision one time, because they've lost the case after that. So we avoid that at all costs.
So are you familiar with the work of Nick McKinley then, who we had on a couple of weeks ago, ex-CIA, and he now is going against the traffickers of human beings?
Yeah, there's a number of very successful former CIA officers going against human trafficking. It's a super exciting thing to see.
And what's your perspective on human trafficking? And do you have any stories from your own experience where you encountered it?
Yeah, so it's a sad world, right? And I want to separate human trafficking in the United States, or really human trafficking in the Western world. I want to separate that from human trafficking in the rest of the world, because frankly speaking, look, I'm former CIA. You're allowed to hate me. You're allowed to disagree with me. You're allowed to not like what I have to say, but I'm always going to tell you the truth. The world outside of the Western world runs on sex trade. That's just the truth behind it. Human trafficking is alive and well because for many, many people in the world, it is a step up in their life to become a sex slave for some other country. Just think about that for a second. Would you rather be like poverty-stricken in India, no ability to read, write, get clean water with a life expectancy of like 24? Or would you say yes to the person that drives through and says, hey, I'm going to sell you into slavery in Germany and you're going to live in the red light district, but 50% of the money you make, you can send back home to your family and you can use that to take care of everybody for multiple generations. There are many people in their life who look at that deal and say yes. And that is human trafficking. That is illegal. That is immoral. That is unethical in Western mindsets, but it is completely acceptable in their worldview, right? So I love it when people are committing their lives, their skills to fighting and combating human trafficking against people who are duped and lied to, especially in the Western world where there really is equal opportunity for all people. But I also have to understand, in my experience in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America, there are lots of people who volunteer themselves into that life to get out of even worse conditions. And that's just the truth behind human trafficking. It's unfortunate, but the sex trade has always been a lucrative trade. It's always been one of the most popular services in the world, in the entire human experience.
That's really sad. And how does that compare then with human trafficking in America?
Yeah, in America, it's really sad because what you end up having is a lot of children that get stolen, children that get taken out of a condition where they do have hope for a better future, and they are essentially pilfered and forced into a life of solitude and servitude. And that's not the same thing as what you see in a place like India or Thailand or Cambodia, where folks volunteer themselves into a scenario or a situation that they believe is better.
Do you think the government should allocate more resources to combat that?
That's a tricky one, right? Because here's another dirty truth, Shaun, right? Human trafficking is not a national security concern. It's just not. America, the UK, we're not at risk because of human trafficking. The governments are not going to fail. Everyday citizens are not going to die because of human trafficking. It would take a terrorist group or some sort of organized criminal element to really be innovative or ingenuitive to create a true threat from human trafficking. So because of that, the government is always going to underfund human trafficking efforts because it's never directly tied to national security interests. And governments are practical bodies. They're taking your tax dollars to make your life, an individual taxpayer, they're taking your money to make your life better. If human trafficking doesn't touch your life in some very specific, dangerous way, they're not going to combat it. It's always going to fall to the cutting room floor, much like the war on drugs, much like, data security and social media bullying, right? That's not going to be their problem.
So out of all of the agencies then in America, does the CIA have the highest powers?
So it's interesting. The The professional term for powers is actually called authorities. We call them authorities in the US. And authorities are what grant you approval to do the operations or the activities that you participate in. In all of the agencies within the IC, the intelligence community inside the USA, we actually divide those authorities among all the different IC partners. So CIA has certain authorities, but it also is missing other authorities. If anything, I would say the people with the highest authorities are actually our Customs and Border Patrol. They have authorities that CIA and NSA and FBI would kill for, but we're not given that authority. The only way we can take advantage of the kinds of activities that Border Patrol or FBI can take advantage of is if we partner with them in a joint mission or a joint operation, which is why you so often see joint missions and joint intelligence partnerships, because that's the only way that we can legally exercise the maximum amount of authority.
On the flip side of that, then, does interagency competition sometimes sabotage efforts?
Yeah, that's called 9/11, brother, right? September 11th happened in the United States because silly, petty interagency conflict blocked a larger picture. There's evidence coming out that the reason January 6th happened was because partnerships didn't work, right? Partnerships that were supposed to land on an intelligence threat didn't land on an intelligence threat. Actions weren't taken. Some actions were actively, canceled. So intelligence failures are dangerous, embarrassing, humiliating, horrible events, but they happen again because human beings are human beings. Your kids don't want to play. Your kids don't want to share toys. You don't really want your wife to eat the last piece of bread. It's the exact same way in the intelligence world. We don't want someone else to get the credit that we could get, especially if we've worked for it. And nobody wants to pay the bills at the end of the day for an operation that doesn't work. So sometimes we choose not to fund an operation at all, and bad things happen.
What is the purpose of the CIA? And in this modern high-tech world, how has its objectives and strategies changed?
It's a good question, but I'll also say that it's a question that's probably been tainted by media, right? If you understand what the CIA does, CIA is the premier human intelligence collection agency against foreign intelligence for the United States. That mission has never changed. That mission will never change. The way that we collect foreign intelligence is not dependent on technology. In Hollywood, they make it look like technology is all powerful. And if you're watching advertisements from everyone from Microsoft to Apple to Tesla and SpaceX, they all want you to think that technology is the penultimate everything, right? But it's not. Human relationships, human exchange, that is the true engine behind all interaction, all innovation, and all growth. The reason technology is born is because human beings are sitting together somewhere building that technology. So just imagine that. Is it better to hack into a secure app like Signal or WhatsApp? Is it better to hack into it, or is it better to simply recruit one of the engineers who's building it in the first place? And once you ask yourself that question, it's very clear which one you prefer. So CIA is not going anywhere. Technology can go to hell. It's going to change, but the engineers building that technology will always be human beings.
So you were asked about, on Concrete, what I wrote about Barry Seal, which was paraphrased to you by Danny there. And I found it interesting. Your answer was that there's always perhaps a grain of truth in conspiracy theories. And you got to view the CIA from the perspective that it's the executive branch. Correct. So whoever's in charge of the government at that time could do whatever they want with it.
That's exactly right.
Which opens it up to abuse potentially.
Correct. And I would go a step further to say that the abuse doesn't end at the executive level, because you also have intelligence subcommittees, and you have Congress people, and you have other politicians vying for that executive position. So there's plenty of space for corruption. There's plenty of space for conspiracy. There's plenty of space for bad people to do bad things and try to cover it up. And that's why I will never be someone who poo-poos conspiracy theories, because all a conspiracy theory is somebody being willing to ask a hard question that other people are avoiding. But the difference is if you start to force information to fit your theory without acknowledging objective information contrary to your theory, that's how you start going down a rabbit hole that's unproductive. If you want to be productive and drive your conspiracy to a theory and drive your theory to a proven event, which has happened multiple times in history, right? It's about taking in all the information, comparing it objectively, and adjusting your theory to make it more relevant and make it more appropriate to predominant evidence.
So we've just got a couple of minutes left. I started out asking you about FireEye. The shares are down 5-6% right now in the stock market, and you've got a little story about FireEye. I've been watching it for a long time. It was almost $100 a share at one point, and it's been trading between 10 and 20 for a number of years now. What's your thoughts on the future of FireEye, which is a cybersecurity company for people who are watching this?
I would invest in FireEye in a heartbeat, because FireEye, let me just, first of all, I know former colleagues of mine who have gone to work for FireEye, and I put my life on the line for them, and they protected me. So all day long, if FireEye says they can do something, I would believe them. They're hiring.
Right. Predicting human behavior, then. How does one get into that, and how accurate is it?
Yeah, so it's in you. I'm going to piss people off, Shaun. I'm sorry.
Go for
so in the professional world, in professional intelligence, professional espionage, even professional interrogation, it all starts from a baseline. That's the very first step, because every human being is different. The way that we're culturally wired, the way that we're religiously wired, our gender, our age, our level of experience, our level of education, our comfort in social settings, all of those little variables all play together on each individual to give us a specific baseline. And a baseline is kind of like your baseline heart rate or your baseline hearing. I'm sure you know what a baseline is in general. But when it comes to being able to read human behavior, read faces, read inflection, read nervousness, you have to understand an individual's baseline first. So one of the first things that we're trained at CIA to do is actively observe indicators of an individual's baseline.
So just tying into what the previous guests said then, we were talking about Brendan Dassey and the Reid technique. And in the Reid technique, they talk about some body language patterns that indicate guilt, but it seems that the officers in that case didn't make allowances for this kid's learning disability and how withdrawn he was.
There you
So
go.
how do you draw a line there to allow for exemptions to the Reid technique?
So yeah, I'm not very fluent in what the Reid technique is, but it sounds like we've got a perfect example here of somebody who didn't apply professional baseline assessment techniques into that interrogation. And now, instead of being able to properly identify guilty behavior, what they did was they identified an individual who had learning disabilities and other variables that were interpreted as signs of guilt. So I'm gonna keep going, Shaun. The place to understand is that when you come into a one-on-one conversation, a one-on-one interrogation, a one-on-one elicitation, any kind of environment where you're going head to head against another human being, you have to start with your observation skills tuned in to observe baseline assessment behavior. What is this person's normal behavior? Right? So like a withdrawn child or a withdrawn adult that was a child with learning disabilities is going to have a baseline right away. They're going to have a baseline that's very consistent with who they are. That's the only thing you can do from that point forward, from the time you meet them, is determine the variance against whatever that baseline is, and then determine if that variance is significant enough to be able to determine their guilt or their innocence, whether they're lying to you or not. But it all starts from there.
So if a suspect has just been apprehended and you have no history with that person, how do you ascertain a baseline?
Well, one of the first things you do is you take that person into some sort of protected area, right? You've heard of good cop, bad cop. You try to reduce the number of sensory inputs, take them away from bright lights, take them away from loud noises, take them away from other people, put them into an environment where it's just them and one or two interrogators or one or two officers who are asking questions. Right away, you have to immediately recognize that their heart rate is going to be up. Whether or not they're guilty or not, they're feeling threatened. They're physically confined. They've been pulled out of their comfort zone. So the baseline for them isn't going to be their normal day-to-day behavior, but it will be a standard deviation within a standard deviation of what that behavior is. Because now what you have is a stressed person, and they will have a baseline of stressed activity. And all of your listeners right now know what they are like when they are stressed out. And it's not the same thing as when they're not stressed out. So the most important thing is to observe, are they fidgeting? Which arm are they fidgeting with? Are they already looking around before I ask questions? Are they sweating? Are they clammy? Are they breathing heavy? Are they mouth breathing or nose breathing? Is their face flush? Is their skin flush around their neck? What can I see right now before I even start putting additional pressure on them so that I can see what their baseline is right now? That's if you only have one chance to interrogate. If you're like me and you're capturing bad guys in the desert and taking them to a secret prison for 15 days, you get multiple days of assessment, right? But if you only have one chance, you have to consider that.
So the people then that are your competitors in the spy world, I imagine they have the same level of knowledge as you about these techniques. If they are captured, are they already trained in ways to counter those techniques?
Yeah, exactly right. It's called counter interrogation. Yes, sir. So we have counter interrogation techniques, and they're very useful, of course, in the undercover world, because you learn how to counter an interrogation. You learn how to throw a baseline so that people don't know what your baseline truly is. But the same kind of techniques are actually really valuable in everyday life too, which is why I teach counter interrogation through everydayspy.com. But the objective here is essentially to observe the behavior of your interrogator and pull assessment data from their behavior faster than they can pull assessment data about your baseline. So it's kind of a cat and mouse game where you know your level of training, but they don't know your level of training. So you see it's a race to the finish for who can get the other person's baseline and who can assess the other person best.
So what would they draw on then? Would it be like breathing techniques, visualization? Could they alter, the biorhythms, the heartbeat through these methods?
To a certain extent. So a lot of what you use in counter interrogation is something known as stress inoculation. Have you heard of stress inoculation, Shaun?
No.
So stress inoculation is when you take somebody and you put them into an artificially stressful environment. So that's just like you take an inoculation for a virus. Oh, look at that. Hey, let's make a plug for COVID. You take an inoculation to reduce the impact of the virus on you. It's the same way when you stress inoculate. You're basically applying artificial stress to reduce the impact of real stress when it happens. So some of our training includes being captured, being detained, being interrogated, putting ourselves through survival training, putting ourselves in the field when we know that there's a surveillance team behind us. These are all artificial stressors that are inoculating us for the field before we go and execute in the real world, right? I see somebody on here made a comment like, it's like pretend torture. Yes, that's exactly right. The first time that you get tortured, you don't want that to be the first time you've ever been tortured. Trust me, you would much rather have somebody else cause you pain who you trust before you're ever in a situation where someone's causing you pain who you don't know. That's the power of stress inoculation.
So did you have to go through that? Have someone torture you who you trusted?
Yeah, it's so there's rules in the American military, the American intelligence infrastructure. There's rules as to how much or how little people can touch you or cause you pain or cause you discomfort. But there is absolutely, like, we've been exposed to extreme heat, extreme cold, temperature changes. We've been, you go without food, sleeping outside for multiple days on end with insects eating at you, all of those kinds of things. We don't pull fingernails because those don't really heal very well, and we don't break bones. But we certainly do things where we simulate heat with electric pulses. So instead of actually being burned by a branding iron, you basically get a zap of a certain frequency so that it feels like you're being burned. Those are the kinds of tools that we can use in the entire defense world, whether it's military or special operations, tier 1 or intelligence, to help people get a sense of what it would be like in the field to actually go hungry or actually be sleep deprived. You have to experience it to know.
So if a spy is captured in the field, what is the likelihood that an interrogation would include torture?
It's unlikely. Generally speaking, the spy world is a very it's a very cloak and dagger world, right? So in almost any case, well, if you're dealing with a third world intelligence service, basically, if you get captured on the continent of Africa by anybody other than the Nigerians or the South Africans, now all of a sudden you're like enhanced interrogation techniques, borderline torture is almost guaranteed, because you're going to be put into a prison cell that's open to the elements. You're going to have, you know, venomous insects and venomous, you know, rodents that are in the cell with you. Like that's some scary stuff. That is not at all what you have in a first world prison cell, where you're safe from the elements and you're safe from, you know, immediate danger, like poisonous spiders and snakes. But to kind of to expand on that, you're almost guaranteed in the intelligence world that the first thing you're going to come into contact with is gentle interrogation, right? What's known as was soft or friendly interrogation. They're going to work to negotiate an exchange of information before they go and make anything really forceful or hard. And that's why you saw that the US had these secret prisons everywhere, because the first step is soft interrogation, and soft interrogation takes weeks. It's the slow removal of comforts over time to slowly break down an individual while giving them a chance to build a relationship where they trust the interrogator. If you don't give them that time, because an informant who trusts you is worth infinitely more than an informant who feels threatened by you and will simply say whatever they have to say to get out of that threatening environment.
So did you ever get in any scrapes that could have landed you in dodgy foreign prisons?
Yeah, we get into a lot of scrapes that can land us in them. And part of the professional training is to make sure you don't get caught. So I was fortunate. My training worked. I was never captured. I was never caught. I had a couple of, you know, what we call hot pursuits. Hot pursuits aren't quite what you see in TV, but we did have a couple of hot pursuits where we were able to, you know, get out of the vicinity, get out of a jurisdiction safely, even though we thought that we may have been had. But yeah, fortunately for me, the most pain I've ever felt was, if you know, at the hands of special trained operators for CIA and DoD.
Can we just zoom into that a little bit then? How did you know that it had gone wrong and you had to extricate yourself?
So there's a lot that goes to answering that question, right, man? So in the professional world, in the professional intelligence world, we're all trained with detection techniques, lie detection techniques, surveillance detection techniques, misinformation detection techniques. These techniques, these skills that we have, where we can see what's happening as it's unfolding. So it's kind of like if you've ever watched your spouse or your parents, I love watching my mom actively get bamboozled. It's the easiest thing to see, right? You watch a salesman talk to your mother, you watch a salesman talk to your stepdad or your father or one of your siblings, and you can see like the dude's stroking my mom's ego. He's feeding her a line. He's telling her what she wants to hear. You know, he knows that he's going to close a sale because my mom is still giggling and playing with her hair, right? You can see that in people who are close to you because you know their baseline so well. So that's the kind of technique that we're taught to spot in other people or in the environment immediately. So I can tell when I'm under surveillance within about 25 or 35 minutes, depending on how dense the urban area is around me. I can run a surveillance detection route that is a planned route with intentional turns and intentional actions that help me determine whether or not I'm under surveillance. And then once I know if I'm under surveillance, I know exactly what to do to count how many surveillance are behind me. What are their vehicles? What are their license plates? What are their physical, what is their physical description? And then do they follow me over a certain period of time? Do they follow me over a certain period of days? So once you know whether or not you're under surveillance, that's kind of the first step to knowing what to do next. But then on top of our own individual detection techniques, we also have the fact that intelligence is a team sport. The movies make it look like spies are individual operators. In reality, it's a team sport. So I've got NSA colleagues who are listening to phone calls and radio chatter. I've got, Department of Defense, Department of State, Department of Treasury who are watching money and watching numbers and watching, associated or known associates to see what their behaviors are at a certain time as it pertains to my operation. So a lot of times we'll get a tip hey, there's telephone chatter between these 2 points or these 2 individuals who are known associates of your target, and it looks like they're going to be, converging on a similar location or a similar path to where you'll be at this time. We think you might be blown, or we think you might be at risk. Or, the information, the intel tells us that something big is about to happen. So we need to expedite the operation so you can be there at the point when whatever the drug shipment occurs, or the handshake happens, or the agreement happens. So you've really got to know who your team is, what your resources are at your disposal, plus have your own detection techniques down pat, because in the moment, you're the only one that can tell yourself what your level of security is.
Have you then got to behave as if you don't know you're under surveillance? Because if they know, there's a risk they may snatch you.
Yeah, that's an excellent observation, Shaun. So we call that surveillance aware behavior. So there's nothing you want to do. There's nothing as bad when you're running any kind of surveillance detection route. There's nothing as bad as appearing like you are surveillance aware or surveillance trained. Surveillance trained means you're doing things intentionally so that your surveillance team will make a mistake and show themselves to you. That means if you look like you're surveillance trained, people are going to, they'll increase the number of people following you. They'll change vehicles. They'll do something different to make it more complicated. If you look like you're surveillance aware, that means that you are aware that someone is following you and you're just trying to figure out who that person is. And professional surveillance teams absolutely hate that, because it's a spit, like you're spitting on their forehead. You are being disrespectful of their tradecraft. And when you're doing that, if you're under surveillance, you're basically in their territory. They can control the environment. They can call in additional resources. They can drop a drone on you. They can call in local police. They can have somebody wrap you up. So the last thing you want to do is make your own surveillance team angry, because just like you said, they'll just take you down and let the police or let that, windowless prison cell break you, because they don't have to keep chasing you for the next 3 days.
And how easy is it to get out of a situation when it gets to the point where they know you know?
The goal is to never get to a place where they know you know. It's infinitely easier to get out of a place where they have, where they're unsure, or where they have, where they're not, not 100% certain. That uncertainty rule, beyond a shadow of a doubt. You've heard about that in the U.S. Court system.
Yeah.
We always want there to be a shadow of a doubt, where they're like, we're pretty sure that guy's CIA. Oh, but maybe, like, we want them to have that little bit of like, it's not a sure thing. We don't know for sure. As long as you have that uncertainty on your side, uncertainty principle takes effect, and you have a distinct advantage that they don't have, because you know the truth. You know what your training is. You know that you're CIA. You know what you're capable of. You know that you're just waiting for the right time or place to affect your escape and evasion plan, and they don't. So that's a massive edge. Even if you're handcuffed, blindfolded, and 24 hours without water, that's a massive edge that you have over everyone else if you know who you are and they don't.
In your career, what do you believe was your best application of predicting human behavior? Perhaps you could give an example of crimes that were prevented.
Yeah, so a lot of the ops that we take a lifetime secrecy agreement that prevents us from talking about our specific operational background. So
Gotcha.
There's not a lot that I can go into there. And I'll also say that, I know that you focus on true crimes. Technically, international espionage isn't really criminal behavior unless you're a citizen of the country where you are spying. So, for example, me being a spy inside the United States isn't illegal. Me being a spy inside Spain is illegal. So it's kind of one of those things where I'm not really stopping crimes. I'm committing the crime on foreign territory so that I can bring home, secrets that Americans use to stay safer. So it's a little bit of a flip there. So I would say that my application was never necessarily to prevent a crime, but to commit a crime. And some of my personal big victories all had to do with convincing patriots of their country, right? Just like we have American patriots, there's Chinese patriots, there's Russian patriots, there are, Congolese patriots and French patriots. Everybody who is in a trusted position of access for their country, where they're within the national security infrastructure, protecting the long-term well-being of their citizens, those are all patriots, right? When you can convince a patriot to essentially transfer their loyalty from their country to you, that's the first step in getting them to transfer their loyalty from you to your country instead.
When we wake up in the morning, we get out of